coming up on More Than Before.
I was 30 years old. I was starting over. I was emotionally bankrupt. I was financially bankrupt. I was relationally bankrupt. I was spiritually bankrupt. I had no account in my life worth drawing from, and I brought no worthwhile thing into this environment except a desire to make a difference, a hunger to be a difference maker.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We have a very special guest today, and I'm honored to have him on the show. He is the owner and CEO of one of the largest leadership brands in the world, whose founder is one of the most prolific leaders of our time. He is a country boy at heart, and you'll probably hear a little bit of his twang when he speaks, but don't let that fool you. He is highly intelligent. He is wise. He is introspective. And he has a huge heart for adding value to every single person that he meets. He is a leader of leaders. He is a man of faith, a husband, a father, a grandfather. But most importantly, he is a man of integrity. Mark Cole, welcome, my friend, to the program. I'm so excited to have you on today. How are you?
I'm doing incredible. About 3/4 of that stuff that you said, I'm not sure if my mom gave it to you or somebody else, but thank you for all of that. The one thing you missed is I am a friend of Nathan Cook's. And I'm going to tell you, I've been looking forward to this moment. I love anything that you're doing, but I love what you're doing with More Than Before. And I love that you're adding value and helping people. So hello to you, my friend. Love you. I love Willow. I love the Cook household. And I love anybody that loves Nathan. So I love all of you podcast listeners. It is so good to have you. I do talk Southern. Don't let that fool you, as Nathan said, because it wouldn't fool you even if I could. So that's where I'm from. That's we may need an interpreter, Nathan, as you have said right there. That's what you got. But I'll tell you this right here. I know leaders. I know people committed to adding value to others. And Nathan, that's who you are, and I'm proud to be on this podcast with you, buddy. I'm glad to be talking about my journey, my life More Than Before, and excited to get to meet and greet your people.
I love that. You know, it's so perfect that you talk about leadership. And I know that leadership is your world, but when I first met you, like actually met you and had an interaction with you, we were at a Maxwell conference. And I remember you were kind of playing the guard for John. This was when we didn't necessarily have someone escorting John to make sure he got to the next place. And so Mark Cole was assigned the task of making sure John gets to this place at this time. And so Mark was kind of running blocker at this point. And I remember looking at him going, man, he is such an amazing servant leader. And I was like, I want to serve Mark today. So I walked over to the water cooler. I filled up a glass of water. I walk over to Mark and I hand it to Mark. And bless Mark, he takes that cup and he hands it directly to John Maxwell. And John Maxwell starts drinking from this cup of water. I'm thinking, no, Mark, no, I'm trying to serve you. I'm trying to give you water. And what I love about that so much, Mark, is it demonstrates just how much of a servant leader you are. And I want to open up with this question because servant leadership is truly a big concept, I think, in your life. Where did you first learn about servant leadership, and how has that served you in your life?
Yeah, and thanks for that story. I actually do remember that. You were wearing a bow tie, which was kind of your signature, and you even challenged me a few times to wear one. But I remember that, and I don't want to miss your point about me by letting it gloss over you. You saw somebody that was trying to serve, and you attempted to serve the servant. And there are some people that will serve John Maxwell with a bunch of water because they hope they get close and in proximity. But you served somebody that was trying to serve, and oftentimes we abdicate our responsibility to serve if the status of the person that we're serving is not high enough to qualify us to take on a servant role. But you showed what real servant is, and that is, don't matter the role of the person, I'll serve servers. I'll be a servant to servants. And so I don't want to gloss over that because that's a very important point of that story that you were not even trying to highlight. But I don't want to miss our listeners to note that you don't wait for status to be servant. You serve at all times. And I appreciate that. You know where I learned it? And I learned to notice servanthood is, I think you, in listening to your podcast and listening to you articulate it, you're not afraid of the faith community. I'm glad, because I'm a preacher's kid. And I grew up around a family that had committed our lives to serving others. And it was a smaller church. And so a lot of times the smaller church pastor's family end up eating last, if at all. There was many nights at the potluck dinner that the food was gone and we'd have to grab a Crystal hamburger. Those of you from the North, Northeast, you don't know what that is, but we would have to find something on the way home because our luck had ran out at the potluck dinner and we just didn't have anything. So I watched my dad. My dad was literally one of the greatest servants of anybody I've ever met. My mom, I say this often, if you ask me who gave me the greatest leadership paradigm, my dad was a district overseer of our entire state of churches. He served on national committees, spoke all over the world. But if you ask me who the leader was, it's my mom. My mom knew how to lead. In fact, oftentimes what my dad said was what my mom told him to say. He was a great puppet in her hands at times with how good her leadership was. But where I learned servanthood was how my dad served my mom. He served my family. He was literally an elected official for 50 years in one form or fashion. And yet he always served. He never lost that winning a popular vote, abdicated his responsibility to lead. And so we saw that. I saw that early on. So just like I have a leadership filter, Nathan, I have a servant filter too. That's why I was able to pick up in your story that the better servant in the story was the one you didn't even mention. I was serving somebody with status. Of course I would. He pays my salary. I better serve him well. I better give him the water. He pays me well. Yeah. And I do try to serve. I'm not downplaying what you noticed, but I am saying that I have a servant paradigm, and I've watched you over and over again learn how to serve no matter what the status of the person is. That's because of my dad. That's because I'm a pastor's kid. And I just watched John Maxwell in his status serve people day in and day out. In my opinion, servant and leadership are synonymous terms.
I love how you bring up that you're a preacher's kid, because there is a stigma about the PK, the preacher's kid.
Yeah, there should be.
They're the wild child. They're the ones that want to blossom and go crazy. I'm curious, like who was Mark Cole as a kid? Like what was your personality like? What were you involved with? What was life like when you were growing up?
Yeah, so the stigma for preacher's kids is noted. It should be. Jake's in our studio. He helps us produce the Maxwell Leadership Podcast. I think Jake's a missionary's kid. Preachers and a missionary kid. He's worse. I mean, he's all over the place. And I'm just kidding. There is a stigma. You know what's funny, Nathan, when people ask me about my passion for leadership, where did I get it? What's going on? I speak with businesses and high-level leaders literally every week and get this question, hey, where did it all start? For me, leadership, maybe not serving, but leadership started for me when I can remember at 5 years old, understanding the power of what I now know is leadership. Now, I wouldn't have used the word leadership when I was 5 years old, but at 5 years old, I'm the baby of five. So there's 5 siblings. I'm baby. I'm redheaded. For those of you that are watching this podcast rather than just listening, the red hair is fading. It's going gray way too quick these days. But I'm a redhead. I'm a typical baby of a big family. I'm a typical redhead. I've been fiery and telling people what to do all of my life. I can remember, Nathan, 5 years old. My oldest brother was at college because he was 20 when I was born. But everybody else was at home. And I can remember at 5 years of age, waking up and saying, where do I want to eat today? And then I'd get somewhere that I wanted to get the entire family to go to. And my project all day long as a 5-year-old was to convince the family where we were going to go eat. So I love to say this. At 5 years old, I knew I loved to tell people what to do. And I knew I loved it even more when they did what I told them to do. And so 5 years of age, I began to realize this desire to influence the outcomes of people and what people would want to do. My family tolerated me all of my life because, again, I'm the sparky, snarky, jerky. I was a jerk often to my older siblings because I just always had an attitude. I had a chip on my shoulder. Nathan, we talk about it all the time. If I had $1 for every time I heard, I'd rather be dead than red on the head. I've heard it all. And all of that really shaped this strong, opinionated desire to make a difference with my voice, with my thinking, with my leadership. And that just continues today. I love to shape the direction of where people are going and what they're trying to accomplish as they're going.
I love that so much. The fact that you're the youngest of five says a lot, and a lot of people will look at your situation and go, oh, well, Mark was the baby of the family. He had special privileges. And while I might agree to that in some aspect or capacity, we have a very similar background, a very similar situation growing up. We spoke a number of years ago, and I remember us having a phone conversation around this. You actually had a sibling with a special need.
I did.
And I believe that having a sibling like that, even in my own life, has had a huge impact on the way that I see the world, on the way that I treat people. And I know that Philip's beautiful soul, his kindness, he sits now in heaven next to Christ.
Yeah.
And I hope that you'd be willing to just share with us, who was your brother to you? And what were some of those lasting lessons that he taught you growing up?
Yeah, thanks for number one, Nathan. The fact that you remembered Philip's name is everything to me. Philip was incredibly special. At 5 months old, they never really got the right diagnosis of what happened to Philip, but he was born normal. And at 5 years old, he lost all his motor skills. He lost his developmental skills. So Philip mentally never really developed beyond a 3-year-old mind. Ability to communicate, he never developed past a year old. I mean, he was stuck with the mama. He loved church. So he and he would wave his finger like he was preaching at church. Philip developed his own language. One of the favorite things I love to say that Philip said was, now, for those of you that's not watching, you can't quite get it all, but Philip had it meant, I want some ice cream. He loved ice cream. And so Philip was my bud, and all of my other siblings kind of had their own relationship with Philip, but Philip, who again never developed, I just almost gave you his entire language. From an audio standpoint, we had a great language of understanding. But Philip's mind in certain areas developed much like kids that are on the autism spectrum. Philip had a brilliance in the area of songs and being able to know where things were. You won't remember this, Nathan. You're so young, but back in the day, before cassettes, 8 tracks, and all that, we had vinyl records. You don't even know what that is, and I'm kind of teasing you a little bit. But Philip, my brother, had over 120 vinyl records that were all, I mean, we were, again, very faith-oriented, and so all of them were Christian recording authors or artists. And we could tell Philip, hey, Philip, go pick out that song, a song out of 120 vinyls with 9 to 10 songs on each vinyl. And Philip would look through his list. He couldn't read. He would look through his records, 120 of them. He'd pick out the right album cover. He'd take out the record. He'd put it on the record player and put it over to the exact song, and he'd do it time after time after time. Never learned to read, but boy, he had an understanding. What growing up with Philip was, and by the way, God rest him, 5 months after my dad passed away at 84, my brother passed away at 69. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like, okay, somebody got to heaven. Now I can go get my glorified body and I can go to heaven. I'll tell you, my greatest concern is that Philip, who got to see me at my worst, is up there telling Jesus and Paul and Peter and my dad things that I really hope nobody tells me. And my chances of getting to heaven may be short because Philip got there first. He knows a lot of junk on me that he was never able to communicate here on earth. But Philip, before he passed, Philip drew up in his body, his whatever his condition was, that again we never really got good diagnosis on, drew Philip up into a fetal position when he passed. One thing I learned about Philip is you didn't have to know how to talk to know how to love. Because I'll never forget the day we walked into his 68-year-old room. And Philip kept looking in Philip's own little way for one more figure to come in the door, and my dad had just passed away a week before. And my mom felt like that she needed to tell Philip because Philip could understand extremely well. And she told Philip that dad had passed and went on to heaven. And Philip just kind of turned over. He was very immobile at the time, but he just kind of turned over, turned his head, and quit looking at the door. Never looked at the door for my dad again. But over the next 5 months, he was in the hospital 6 times over 10 days, lost his will to live, because love was the reason he was living. The other thing I learned from Philip was an understanding of people that don't sound like me, look like me, act like me, because Philip could not contain his emotions in public crowd. He'd take his shoe off, he'd bite his fist, bang his head as all reactions to stimulation. And Philip would do that, and in 30 seconds, he'd be done with his temper tantrum, as my dad used to call it, and he'd be loving everybody and laughing and just hugging people. He could switch on a dime. But here's what I learned probably the most about Philip is the ability to understand people that don't look like me, think like me, act like me, and still see them as greatly valuable. Because the times that people would look at Philip because he was obviously different than everybody else in the restaurant, in the grocery store, it would hurt me that they would prejudge Philip without really knowing him and his heart. And there was just a tenderness that came from that. Again, just the fact that you would remember Philip's name and that you would ask me about him on your podcast and let me be really kind of sentimental is a real gift. Thank you for that.
And I love it because, I don't know, there's something about Philip that as I was kind of reading about him and his smile and his laugh, and just even what you've said about him today reminds me so much of my own brother. And my brother is Isaac, means laughter, is what his name means. And that's something that I find so often with people who have a special need is there is just a joy and a laughter about them when they're living life. And whether they can say 4 words or whether they can, speak with a huge dictionary, there is an incredible joy that they have of just living life and showing up. And like what you just said, not prejudging people, just loving people where they are. And I love that. And I also love the fact that you can learn, I think from an early age, we learn so much from our siblings, but having a brother in your life who has a special need, it forces you to start learning very quickly of how do you love, how do you serve other people. And you are a lifelong learner. In fact, you've had some really amazing mentors in your life. You spoke about your father. He was a bishop in the church. Your grandfather was an incredible leader. He built the Tupelo Children's Mansion, which offers hope to orphans and disadvantaged children, and has been doing that since 1953. You've been personally mentored by the #1 leadership expert in the world, John Maxwell, for years. And excluding John Maxwell, because if you want to hear some of the great leadership insights and lessons that Mark extracts from John, which is absolutely gold, go check out the podcast, the Maxwell Leadership Podcast for that. But Mark, I want to ask you this. Who are some of the greatest leaders in your life who have truly mentored you and brought you up, excluding Maxwell? Because I think Maxwell gets a lot of press, but there are a lot of people that have helped you to build you into the man that you are today.
Yeah, so I can go with the names that people would recognize here, because I certainly have had exposure to some of the greats, some great, great leaders, for several years. I think it was 7 years. Every quarter, 4 times a year, I would meet with Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines, and I would talk to him about how do I develop ability to lead a globally recognized brand. I would talk to Joel Manby, who was vice president of Saab Automotive, and then he was president of Hershen Family Entertainment, which is about 1920 theme parks, and then went and ran a publicly traded entertainment company, SeaWorld. And so he would meet with me once a quarter. I met with the president of Honey Baked Ham and Cheryl Botchelder of Popeyes, and Dan Cathy of Chick-fil-A. So I got to meet with some very significant global branded people to help me stretch my thinking. There's other people that I met. We've talked about faith a little bit. There was a season in my life that I felt like I was taking on more responsibility than I had the spiritual and emotional fortitude to lead. And so I had a guy named Jeff Henderson who's written some books. It's not quite as known as people perhaps like Ed Bastian, but I had people at that level that would be a spiritual mentor, a spiritual coach to me. But Nathan, I've had people like you on my calls every single Tuesday that I can do my leadership calls. I do a leadership call every Tuesday to where I teach for about 30 to 45 minutes. And then I'm supposed to be the mentor asking questions. But by the time that 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 hours is over, I'm the one that's been mentored. And I've become a mentee to people in my community. What I will tell you, my philosophy on mentoring is not John Maxwell to Ed Bastian to Jeff Henderson to Nathan Cook. It's really about always having a posture of being a mentee. I want to constantly position myself so that I can learn and grow and apply from any environment. And that has served me well. So I'm a mentor, I'm a mentee, I'm a benefactor of almost everyone I've ever met because I try to pick something up that will help me. I mean, in this session right here, I remember Isaac's story, but it took me a minute for you to remind me Isaac's story to be able to make that link that you and I had. Man, you have just showed me. You want to know how to impact you the next time I'm with you, Nathan? Yeah. Remember Isaac's story. Remember Isaac's name, because you profoundly impacted me a few moments ago by not only asking me about Philip, but remembering his name. And so I just got mentored by you. And I have found the greatest students are the one that's always ready. There's a quote I wish I knew who to attribute it to because I use it all the time. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I think when the mentee is ready, the mentor appears. So I've been mentored by some great, great people, but I see mentorship more as an opportunity to learn to pick up something that I currently don't have than it is to be in proximity with greats. Because again, God's been really good to me. I've been around a ton of great people, had dinner with 4 U.S. presidents, met with 7 country presidents this year already. I get to be around, because of what I get to do, some really great people that if it was all about name dropping, I could do it. But to me, it's not about the greatness of their name or their accomplishment. It's about what they're learning right now or what they have learned that will help me in the season that I'm in. And that's how I try to look at some of the people that I've had exposure to.
I love that so much, because I think it might have been Stephen Covey who said, I can learn something from everyone.
Yeah.
And it really is a posture that you have to have going into anything, that you're not the expert at anything. In any room you walk into, you want to be the person that is constantly learning, and we both have a mentor that has done that throughout his entire life, that we've been able to pull those lessons from. And I love that you live this out truly, Mark Cole. You are in front of some amazing people. In fact, I always want to ask you this question. I have, similar to you, I've been around some pretty amazing people in my life. And there are moments where I look around in the room and I think, why in the world am I here?
Yeah.
Like, did someone get the wrong Nathan Cook? Did someone get the wrong Mark Cole? Like, did someone not read my pedigree? Because it's not, I don't feel like it's up to the par of a lot of people. I'm curious for you, how do you carry yourself in those conversations when you walk into a room, when you know that you are in a room full of heavy hitters? Like, if you're in the room with someone that's from SeaWorld, or if you're in the world, or if you walk into the room and you're in a room full of, the president of Wyndham, or fill in the blank, you're in the room of what we would say is of great people. How do you carry yourself with a confidence, even though deep down inside you don't really feel like you necessarily belong in that room?
Well, so let me give you, this is a really good question. I'm glad you're asking this, both because I need to make sure that I am disciplined in living out the answer I'm going to give you, but also I think it's very important for us. Number one, I think it's centered around gratitude, but I think it's centered around gratitude of any room. I believe I should be just as thankful to be right here on your podcast with you, speaking to somebody I may never meet, than I am the podcast I recorded earlier this afternoon to Maxwell Leadership Podcast, which has crazy amounts of downloads each and every week. I'm just as honored right here, right now to be with you, because I'm going to speak to somebody here I don't know, just like I did an hour and a half ago to another podcast that I happen to be the host of. I happen to be on it I'm on it more than John, because I do all the interviews with the non-Maxwell content that we do. I'm blown away. I can't believe that, Nathan, you would invite me into your environment that you've worked hard to grow and build, and you would trust me with a microphone on your stage, communicating to your audience, speaking in your podcast. No less grateful for this moment than I am the moment that I had a while ago. So I'm very thankful for the moment a while ago. I am more prevalent on the Maxwell leadership content with millions of downloads than John Maxwell. I'm blown away. I'm no more grateful than I am for this opportunity, though. So I can get awed by the magnitude of an opportunity, but I always use every opportunity and lay it on the foundation of gratitude, which keeps me humble, by the way. The second thing, so first know this, there's not a room that I walk into that the stature of the person of this room compared to the stature of the person, success of the person in this room makes me any more grateful. I'm grateful, period. The second thing that I do try to do is to be humble in no matter which room. So gratitude a lot of times leads to humility, but here's where it's different. Grateful, I can't believe I have the opportunity. Humble, the opportunity could be taken from me at any point. I've seen people come and go, Nathan, as you have. I've been around leadership enough to know that being relevant today should be met with as much gratitude and humility as being irrelevant yesterday. John says it like this. When I first started, I wasn't as bad as people thought I was. And that's true for me. When I started working with John Maxwell, I was the telesales representative. I was 30 years old. I was starting over. I was emotionally bankrupt. I was financially bankrupt. I was relationally bankrupt. I was spiritually bankrupt. I had no account in my life worth drawing from, and I brought no worthwhile thing into this environment except a desire to make a difference, a hunger to be a difference maker. And when I came, I wasn't as bad as they thought I was. They gave me a salary. They put 5 people between me and John. My leader reported to John. And every one of them were younger than me and was running a budget smaller than what I had just ran 6 months before. And yet, I would tell you, I wasn't as bad as they thought it was. But today, Nathan, I got to tell you something. I'm not as good as people think I am. Somewhere in the middle of all of that keeps you grounded, that no matter what room you walk in, rooms with presidents sitting right by our former president, George Bush, 3 or 4 years ago at dinner for hours and hours. Somewhere in the middle of that, realizing I'm not as good as people think I am in some environments, I'm not as bad as people think I am in other environments, keeps me grounded where I need to be. So I lay a foundation of gratitude and humility when I walk into any room, including the great rooms I've been in.
Mm.
Now that I've said all of that, when you walk into rooms with players, people that are successful, people that want to make sure that they make good use of their time, they're surveying the room and saying, should I spend time with her? Should I spend time with him? Two things I think you must do. You must walk with confidence. I should be in this room. Not I deserve to be in this room, because very, very few rooms do I deserve to be in. But I should be in this room. This is a room I should be in. Carry yourself with confidence, because people are drawn to confidence. I've walked into rooms before and people just went, hey, you're walking with an air of confidence. What do you do? I want to know, because I'm walking into the room confident I should be in the room. The second thing that I would tell you is be interesting. Find a way to be interesting. Now, you know the best way I know to be interesting is be interested.
Mm.
When you're interested in someone else, all of a sudden you become interesting to that person, because people love to tell you their story. People love to tell you their accomplishments. So when I walk into big rooms, I think of interesting questions to ask so that I appear interested, which then makes me interesting.
Mm.
And I think in every room, if you can walk in the room with confidence, I should be in this room. Again, don't confuse I should and I deserve. I should be in this room. There's some reason bigger than me that I should be in this room, and then walk in determined to be interesting. And I think that those two things have got me, that has faked a lot of people out that I should be in that room.
I love that. I mean, it's so good. By the way, if you missed anything that he just said, go back and listen to this again. Listen to it again, because it is so good what Mark just said. You know, Mark, I truly believe right now a lot of people in the world feel like they're running on empty. They feel bankrupt physically, like you felt so many years ago. You felt bankrupt physically, mentally, spiritually, monetarily. In every category of life, you felt bankrupt. And I think a lot of people feel that right now. And there was actually a point in your life where, man, it just felt like there was no way forward. And so I'm curious, you know, most times I feel like when we get to that place, when we feel bankrupt, it's because we start looking at the past, we start looking at the failures, and we start saying, well, I've already spent all of my chances. I'm curious for you, what did you do to overcome the identity of your past and your failures in order to forge a new journey of growth forward?
I look back, such a good question of how you get over your past so that you can move forward. Where I thought you were going was, how do you rest? How do you make sure that you come from a place of rest? And a whole conversation on that we can get into if you want to. But I think you have to come from a place of rest. Now, that's where my mind was triggering as you were asking that question. But I do think you have to come from a place of peace, a place, I like to say, palms up.
Mm.
You're just like, okay, I do have a past. I have a past that I don't know how to reconcile it and look forward to the future. But I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do first. I'm going to quit holding tight to my past, and I'm going to do the same posture that I try to do with the leadership I've been given now. I did the same thing with my past, and I said, okay, I'm not going to hold it. If it falls out of my hands, if God takes it out of my hands, if people want to take it out of my hands and beat me up with it, or people want to take it out of my hands and throw it away and say it doesn't matter, I'm not holding on to it. You get to choose if you hold on to it. But I'm also not going to act like I don't have a past that bankrupted me. See, we're living, you really dealt with about three things in that question that are pathways I want to go. We live in a world right now, call it post-pandemic, call it whatever you want to. We live in a world that people are emotionally bankrupt. In fact, they've already faked themselves out with buying. All the spending we were doing post-COVID with all the free money that was out there made us attached to possessions. And so we gave up our sense of worth in the hope of anticipating acquiring something that would give us worth. Well, then that's kind of like 3 days after Christmas. Your grandkids can't even remember what they got for Christmas because they're bored with it. Well, we bought things and boats and houses and different stuff and did all of that to where now we realize how empty that is. And we are more emotionally, mentally bankrupt. Our capacity is lower than it's ever been.
Mm.
I think because people then try to replace that with the lies of their past and define themselves in those low moments with other low moments, we have created this emotional capacity crisis that I'm watching leaders quit, give up. They're basically going into quarantine from difficult environments.
Mm.
We went into quarantine when we got COVID, when somebody was around, when we got exposed. We did contact tracing. Well, now we almost do contact tracing with, am I going to have a difficult situation today? I think I will emotionally quarantine so I don't have to deal with the challenges of the day. And so it's created this deficit that's made us now look at our past failures as if they are a ongoing life sentence to how we have to live life. So we don't have the emotional capacity to say, that's my past. You can't define me. You can't define me with my past. We used to be strong enough to be able to say that. We've lost our strength. So our past now begins to define us. So as I, 25 years ago, wanted to redefine my life, I just laid my past out there and said, this is what I am. Sorry. If you want to do it, if you want to use me, that's fine. But I did something really unique, Nathan. When I came to Enjoy, that was the name of John's company 24 years ago. When I came to Enjoy, I made 2 vows. I would never have another significant relationship in my life. I had had a terrible, terrible track record with a significant relationship. And then I will never lead again because the pressure of disappointing people that I had in the first 30 years of my life made me bring 2 pieces physically, literally, basically. I brought 2 pieces of luggage into a leadership environment. I'll never have a significant relationship with one of the most relationship people I've ever met, John Maxwell. And I will never lead again. I'm working for a leadership organization. And I think a lot of us deal with it with letting it define us so we can't forge ahead. In my case, for 3 years, I didn't take any leadership position. We let it, may not let it define us, but we allow it to help us to make vows that we won't do it. I'll never do that again. I think the third thing that I've watched a lot of people quit reaching for the future because of the past is they lose hope. And I think that's what the biggest crisis is that we have now. We let it define us because we think that we're always once a loser, always a loser, once a failure, always a failure. We let it make us vows. I'll never put myself in that position again. Or then we do the third, and I think the worst. We give up hope. And I believe the world is in a place of hopelessness as it relates to leadership and leadership making a difference in a greater way than we've ever seen, at least in my lifespan. We don't believe that political leaders can help us anymore. As a society, we don't believe that religious leaders can help us anymore. We don't trust them. We don't believe Wall Street's in it for us. They're in it for themselves. There's no place where leadership is shown. We don't trust athletes. We don't trust entertainers. We don't trust anybody anymore. We have isolated ourselves from believing that good leadership will bring hope to the world. We've got to change that. Nathan, we got to change that.
It's so good. And we've heard it so many times, leaders are dealers in hope.
Yeah.
And you're right. We need more leaders to step up. We need more leaders to paint a picture of opportunity moving forward, that there is hope, that there is something forward, that if you do get knocked down, you can get back up, you can move forward. And I love what you say with that, Mark. You know, for someone who's been, I think we all have failures in life. We all get knocked down. We all get back up. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I really love about your story, Mark, is your sacrifice at every single level of your life. You get to a point in your life and you feel that there is never a point in your life where you're not going to sacrifice anymore. You're going to continually sacrifice. And I know one of those things for you is family. Family is
Yeah.
huge, absolutely huge for you. In fact, I couldn't have written this question more perfectly, because your daughter called just a little bit ago, right before we jumped on, and you said, "Hey Nathan, I love you, but my daughter's calling, and I'm going to pick this up," and you picked it up, and it's a testament of who you are to say, "I don't care what is in front of me. There is nothing more important than my family." You have sacrificed a lot of things in your life for your family, not just for your immediate family, for your kids, but you've also done a huge sacrifice for your grandkids. You are a huge role within their life. And I've talked about this before in the past on the podcast, and I want to bring it back up because I think it's so powerful. What is the role of a grandparent today? Because I meet a lot of grandparents that are stepping into the shoes of a parent because their kids aren't quite delivering the type of care that they need to for their kids. And, as a grandparent yourself, what do you see the role as grandparents? How do you step into a role of loving your grandkids, loving your kids in the environment that we have, where I think a lot of kids are getting lost because they don't have that father, mother figure. They don't have that grandparent figure. What would you speak to the grandparent that's out there that's saying, "I feel like I'm having to step up into these shoes and I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing here in my life"? What would you say to that person?
Yeah. So once again, I love your questions and I love the context that you give your questions because it just stimulates me. It makes me want to go 15 different directions. Um, One of those is the importance of family. And the importance of my family has been questioned a lot in my life. My parents literally taught the philosophy that it was God, ministry, and then your family got whatever's left over. I mean, I heard my dad say that 100 times as a preacher, and it would get claps and hand raises. But here's the deal: he didn't just preach it. That's the way we lived. I mean, in my family got what was left over. Well, I spent 30 years trying to live and model that philosophy: God, calling, ministry, and then family got what left over. And I lost a marriage. I lost relationship with my parents because ministry needed to go on when I needed them the most in a very broken place of life. So I came in and established this second opportunity that I had to establish family. And I went, "God, you can't call me to something that you don't call Stephanie, my wife, to first. I've already been down that road before. You got to call her to something." And as only God can do, he did that when he called me to be in proximity and availability to John. He told Stephanie. That's cool. But when we knew that was the calling, we counted the cost because we knew John was at a different stage than I was, and I was going to have to travel the world and hand him water as people handed me water. I really have been his bag carrier for 23 years. I'm the CEO, but my greatest job function is carrying John Maxwell's bags. And so Stephanie and I counted the cost because we had a young family. I started at 36 as my first biological child. I was an instant dad of an 11-year-old daughter when Stephanie and I got married. My first biological child and my only biological child, Macy, came when I was 36 years old. I was in the middle of building this career and chasing John Maxwell around the world. My value system of family has been under scrutiny from a lot of people because I travel a lot. But Stephanie and I have worked hard to make this a family assignment that I'm on. Worked hard at it, which means when Macy, my 12th grader, calls me in the middle of the day when I know she's getting college acceptance letters, I look at Nathan and say, "Hey, before you start the podcast, bud, my daughter's calling." I've looked at John Maxwell and said, "Man, that's a good thought you're giving me right now, but Stephanie's calling. Give me just a minute." Because we have to do certain things so that other things are possible in our life. One of the things we're having to do right now, you ask about grandparenting. Our oldest daughter is going through some serious, significant emotional, spiritual crises, not crisis. There's crises going on. And so in January this year, a year ago, Stephanie, my wife, and I became legal and physical custody of our 4 grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have a 12th grader, Macy, mine and Stephanie's daughter. I have an older daughter that's really trying to rebuild and figure life out. In the meantime, I've got a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 19-month-old that are in our house every single day, every single night. Family, counseling, school, feeding. We're at mid-50s raising 4 children. And Macy, who's raising all of us as a senior, because seniors know everything. Here's my point. That doesn't make me a hero. It makes me a family man. My family needs me. Don't give me a star. In fact, the only star that's qualified in this whole situation is my wife, who has always been my hero. She's now my superhero. And that is an understatement. Stephanie Cole is my superhero, but don't even call her a hero, because she has her perspective on life, because 45, 50 years ago, her grandmother raised her in a difficult time in her life. We're just paying forward our blessings. We have so many blessings. We have enough capacity that we can help 4 little children really have constant love and constant care. That's what grandparenting means to me. Some of you, grandparenting means I just had my family over for Thanksgiving and I fed them turkey and I sent them back home. Well, be a good grandparent. My grandparenting days is being called mom and dad. Not really. We don't let them call us that, but it's being a true mom and dad to 4 little children that need us. And we have the capacity to do it. We have the blessings in our life to be able to do it. See, grandparenting, I believe, is no different than parenting. It's no different than leading. It's sensing a problem, doing inventory of what we have that we can address the problem, and then giving it all so that the problem can be solved. That's what we're doing as grandparents, but that's no different than what the rest of you grandparents are doing. You're doing what is needed to be the best for the people God's given you stewardship of.
I love that answer, Mark, because I love the fact that you say, don't look at me as a superhero. Don't look at my wife as a superhero. You know, we're showing up. In fact, I think that's how a lot of people feel. A lot of grandparents, a lot of parents that are in the throes of life, they're looking at it going, I'm not sure if I'm going to survive through this. And I hope you hear what Mark's saying. When you show up, the world looks at you and thinks of you as a superhero. Like, everyone from the outside is going to see you as a superhero, not because you have superhuman powers, but it's because you show up when others aren't showing up in the capacity that they need. And so I think that's one of the really powerful things about you, Mark, is you see a need and you show up.
Yeah. And can I say one more thing on this? Because I started to, and then when you responded back like that, I want to say something about that. In the state of Georgia, that's where I'm from. If you can't tell where this Southern came from, I live in Georgia. I grew up here. I worked hard to learn how to talk like this. In the state of Georgia, just like there is in 14 other states in the United States, during COVID, states quickly passed an Extended Family Care Act. An Extended Family Care Act is where other interested parties in a family, in our case grandparents, can step in very quickly and become legal and physical custody of children to save them from going into the system and becoming a number. And so it used to be, to do what we're doing, it took months. It took a bunch of agreement. Everybody had to come together. The adult kids, the parents would have to go under a lot of scrutiny and evaluations and all this kind of stuff. What happened in COVID is what happens in leadership. People silently quit. Parents silently quit parenting their kids. And it was such a pandemic within the pandemic that states had to respond, like the state of Georgia, so that we could step up. Now, we as grandparents have a couple of options there. 1, do nothing. 2, do something but judge our adult children that can't provide. Or 3, realize that even our adult children are impacted negatively by all of the things we went through in the pandemic. I give more understanding to leaders in my company that silently quit than I give to my daughter, who has silently quit for a season of her life, revoke my leadership license, because if I can extend grace in a corporate setting to a leader that has silently quit because they're emotionally going through something, shouldn't I even much more extend grace to my family that are going through some of the same traumatic responses to a post-pandemic world? And grandparents that are out there, or parents that are having to step up for another parent that's not kind of doing their thing, just be thankful you have the capacity to pay it forward and extend it. Don't spend all that time trying to judge and condemn and challenge people. Step up and be what needs to be done. And in our case, our grandkids are responding wonderfully. They're loving life right now. And last night I played Madden 24 because my 10-year-old grandson, that's what he requested for his birthday. And I was down there learning how to own him in Madden 24. And I did beat him. I've never beat him in Madden 23, 22, 20. I didn't beat him. I beat him last night. I like Madden 24.
Secretly, no one knows that Mark actually bought the game like a month ago, and he's been playing it just.
The secret's out, Nathan. You had to go
anything
there,
you
bud.
can do to get a leg up on your grandkids. I love that so much. Mark, I have absolutely loved time together. It's been so amazing. I want to thank you for joining me today, sharing your story. I have one more question for you before we wrap up here. But before I do, I want to encourage all of you who are listening to go and check out Mark and Maxwell Leadership, what they're doing in the world. You can follow them on social media. I would highly encourage you, go download and listen to the Maxwell Leadership podcast, which is absolutely phenomenal. You're going to hear Mark on there quite often, giving some amazing lessons on what John has taught, but also lessons from his own life. And they talk to great leaders all around the world who are solving problems, everyday problems that you and I go through. So go check that out, the Maxwell Leadership podcast. You can also, if you're interested in bringing Mark and his team to serving you and your people, head over to maxwellleadership.com and you can learn more about that. Mark, it's so important to surround yourself with people who believe in you. And I think many of us get into situations that are beyond us, that we think are bigger than us, that require more than we possibly think that we have inside of us. And you've spoken to the importance of borrowed belief in the past. And so I would love for you to end on this piece. What does it mean to borrow someone's belief? And why should someone seek someone else out to borrow their belief?
It goes back to one of the tragedies that I said that we have in today's world is a loss of hope. We've just lost belief. We've lost self-belief. We've lost belief in others. We've lost belief in leadership. We've just lost belief. And that then stymies or paralyzes our ability to hope. And so it goes back to some of that we said earlier in our time together. But I can remember, Nathan, you will remember this. I mean, you were around when John Maxwell looked at me and he said, Mark, for you to really be believable in carrying my legacy, being a successor to me, he said, you've really got to learn how to communicate on my stage. And Nathan, I got to be honest with you, man. I communicated some as a preacher's kid. And by the way, I grew up Pentecostal, which really means the louder you can scream, the better communicator you are. It has nothing to do with content. It means if I can get people fired up, amped up, given a standing ovation over hype, I'm a pretty good communicator. And I'm just messing with all of my Pentecostal friends out there. You guys are great communicators, great content. I wasn't. That was not my jam. My jam was how excited can I be? And so when John began to say, Mark, you need to be believable communicating on my stage, we were not saying that I needed to communicate like John, although half the time I felt like I had to put his armor on. I had to communicate well. What we were saying is there needs to be a believability when I talk vision and I talk future. Nathan, I was terrible. I mean, again, you were there in some of those times where I'd stand up and try to communicate, and John would prop me up and come up and tell people how good I did. Other times he'd come up and say, Mark really wasn't that good today, but the good news is I'll go back and teach him some stuff and he'll be better next time. I mean, he would say that in front of 3,000 people, and I'd just smile and say, hi, Mom. I mean, what do you say?
And a lot of you listening right now think that Mark is overplaying this. He's not overplaying this.
Oh, no,
I remember the first time he stepped on stage, and I looked at the table and I was like, who in the world is this guy? Like,
Oh,
he
yeah.
is horrible.
Yeah.
But I actually got to see you get better. He is
Well,
better.
thank you. I'm still trying to get better, but I mean, I was running. Let's see, the first time I did that was 2015. I was running 6 multi-million-dollar companies. I was very comfortable in my world, but when John got me up there, back to the statement I made earlier, I wasn't as bad as all y'all thought I was, and right now I'm not much better than you think I am. But what I will tell you is that standing on John's stage when I didn't want to be there and I was doing it for him, I didn't believe in myself, which, by the way, 70% of communicating effectively from stage is confidence. It's not content. It's confidence. I had no confidence, zero, not 70%. I had no confidence. And I was having to borrow John's belief in what he was seeing the purpose of this was. Not his borrowed belief that I was good. I knew I wasn't good. There wasn't enough belief he could give me. But I borrowed his belief that we were going somewhere back in 2015 and 16 when I started communicating on John's stages. I had communicated on other stages and I was much better on other stages. But when I was on John's stages, I had no confidence because he was the master communicator and I was speaking to people that were paid speakers. I was a paid business guy. My confidence was not because not being good. My confidence was not because of a stage. My confidence was being on Maxwell's stage. And when I couldn't get confidence in being good, I had to get confidence that this was good for me to do. And you know where I had to get that access? I had to get it by borrowing John Maxwell's belief in me. Now, I could go much longer in the story, but I think I've illustrated it. Here's the point. When you don't believe that you should be in an environment, when you don't believe that you should be leading what you're leading, when you don't believe that you're a good parent, you need to find a source that does believe that you are, you can be, or there is a purpose to not being. And then you need to borrow that belief. Because I wasn't ever believing that I was going to be a John Maxwell communicator. Wasn't, am not, will never be. That's not my lot in life. But I knew John saw something about my ability to communicate from stage that I had to overcome. And the only way I could overcome was believing that there was a bigger purpose than being a great communicator to me standing on the stage. Some of you are wrapping up 2023 and starting 2024. And you have not succeeded in a certain area because you have not found a belief source. You've not found a place to foster confidence. And I would just tell you, you need to pause this podcast. You need to slow everything down. If there's only one takeaway I can give you, you need to go on a quest to find confidence in this area that's holding you back. And it's probably not going to be within you because you've been trying that. You've been faking it till you make it, and there's no such thing. I know that's a cute little statement. It's not true. You can't fake it till you make it. You got to believe it, and you've got to keep borrowing belief until you get there. And by the way, the reason you don't fake it till you make it is everybody knows you're bad. Like Nathan sitting there at his table knew I was bad. So why not just say I'm bad? There was no faking it. I wasn't good. But I still had to borrow confidence because there was a bigger reason than being good up there. Some of you listen to this podcast. You are good, you are incredible, and you're on a journey. And you need to find a source to mine that has belief that you can borrow.
Wow. Absolutely amazing. Mark, I love you so much. Thank you so much for being on here, my friend. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you to all of you listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend, because I know this episode is truly going to lift someone up today. And like always, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.